ultimately, but if I could crack the top 5, that would be a dream come true.
Hey folks, thanks for joining Monday Mindshare, and what a treat we've got today to have Nicole Bitter on with us. How are you, Nicole?
Great, thanks so much.
Good
Nice
to see
to
you.
be
How's
here.
Austin treating you? It's been a cold middle of the US, obviously, but did you get much there, snow there, or not yet?
No, we've been really fortunate. It was quite chilly this morning. I think my dog and I went out for a quick run and it was about 32 degrees. So a little cold for Texas, but no snow here.
How's Minnie taking to the mother and father as two ultra
Oh,
runners?
I think Minnie truly found her best family. So she seems to love to run, maybe even more than us. I don't know. She kind of like lives to run.
Well,
So
pity help her if she didn't like running. So I don't know
yeah.
what.
Exactly. I mean, it was kind of fate, but
Yeah,
she clearly has been very happy, thankfully. I don't, to your point, that would be hard if we adopted a dog who wasn't really into it. So it's just nice to be able to have a dog who also shares our passion.
absolutely. Well, folks, maybe just to set the caliber of our guest today, USATF, two-time trail champion of the year, runner of the year, and then won the nationals twice, and we'll get back to that. I think 3 times in the top 10 for Western States, right?
Yes.
Being with Ultras since 2015 and a couple of years, I guess, with SFuels. What is your fastest 100-miler to date so far?
Well, the fastest I've run was back in 2015 at Rocky Raccoon. I ran a 14:22. So that was pretty fun. And Zach and I are actually just decided, I think we're going to go back and do that race. So
Oh,
will be
cool.
fun to revisit. I haven't done the race since 2015. So
What's the time of the year on that, Nicole?
it's actually in 2 weeks. So
Okay.
yeah, it's
There
pretty
you go.
soon actually.
Yeah. Well, cool. You had the US record for some time for the 100 miles. Is it still a world record? Or, sorry, the US record, or where is it currently on the rankings?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think Camille has broken my time at Tunnel Hill, another course. So that's considered a trail now. And Zach actually has the trail record there. So
Okay.
Camille is certainly an amazing athlete. So
Yeah.
I was just proud to have the record for a bit of time, I guess.
For sure, like all records, right? So you grew up with a family of runners, or what's the background?
No, really not so much. So my parents really were not runners when we were kids. So my dad was quite a good soccer player. He was born in Greece and grew up there and came to the United States when he was in college. And so he was quite athletic from that standpoint. But
Right.
my sister and I grew up just playing all kinds of different sports. And my mom worked quite a bit when we were kids. She was an elementary school principal. So, you know, when she was working, we oftentimes were just at sports camps.
Right.
So I started out figure skating. One of my mom's teacher was a figure skating coach. So that was our first sport. And then we just did other activities. I think in 7th grade, I went to try out for the basketball team. And ironically, that was a sport that I had not really done much of in camps and such. And my gym coach pulled me aside and said, Nicole, I don't think you're going to make the team, but I saw you run the mile in gym class. So I think you should go out for the cross country team. And so like any kid, I just really wanted to be in a sport in school. So I decided to go out for cross country. And I guess that was my fate. I kind of found what I was good at and I just started to love to run.
I have to ask your Greek heritage. You know, Dean Canassis talks about this kind of amazing genetics that apparently he has. I'm assuming you've inherited some of this also with some of your running times.
I mean, I would love to claim to have those. I don't know. I think it might be him, but yes, we'll say that Greek heritage must play a role.
So you wear effectively, in my mind, 2 professional hats. One, obviously, professionally as a lawyer, and then secondly, effectively a professional runner, any way you look at it. Do you ever question like whether you ever wanted to or wished you would have just had one career, or how do you think about it?
I don't know. I mean, now I'm 40, right? So I'm definitely getting older. So I'm very thankful to have both, both hats,
Yeah,
because I feel like at this point I'm fortunate to be healthy and still competing at a high level. But
yeah.
at a certain point, I assume with age, some of it is
You'll
going to
drop the
fade a
lawyer
bit.
and you'll just become a runner.
Exactly. That's how it's going to work. But I don't know. I really like the element, the thought of balance, whether that
Yeah,
exists, right? I mean, that's always the hard one to navigate, but I do like having both, simply because I think that if I were just to spend more time running, I would probably take it too seriously, and I think I would just have lesser results. I think having
yeah,
both aspects is just what I prefer. And it just seems like, I don't always do an amazing job navigating it. There have been times when I think, just from a stress perspective at work, it's negatively impacted my racing, right? If I really
right.
look back at it. But
Yeah.
I think in the scheme of things, for the most part, it's doable. And so I'm kind of thankful I've been able to do both, because I truly enjoy both. And maybe it's because I have, I have the release from the other that is really beneficial.
Yeah, no, I mean, well said. I think everyone probably operates the same, but you're running both at pretty high calibers. So that's the uniqueness here. 100-mile, running, people have different reasons, even marathons, half marathons, etc. But how many have you done now?
I don't know. I was asked that question recently, and I meant to look back on kind of the ultra sign up, right? Which I think is probably a good indication. I have no idea.
But it
I
must be a dozen plus, right?
more, I think.
Yeah.
But I've been ultra running for the last 10 years,
Right.
a little over. So, I mean, I probably average about 2 a year, I'd say. So
Okay.
maybe you're right. I mean, but some
So
years, no, I don't.
my real question behind that though is like, after you've done it that many times, what's still getting you to the starting line? What are you trying to explore, find, experiment with? What is it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Maybe it's a loss of IQ, right? Like I don't know. I think it's still is just the challenge to see how fast I can do and compete at a high level. And maybe now at 40, it's just kind of seeing how long I'm blessed to have the ability to compete at this point. I think there's an element of that in the story. For me, running is kind of like seasons, where there are, moments where you are just hitting it on all cylinders and it's more like a summer. And then there are times it's more winter, you're injured,
Yeah.
or you're just not having the success. And so I think when you reach that point, when you're kind of more in a summer season, I like to capitalize on that, just
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it just seems like, that's when it feels great to be out there competing. So for now, I just feel like I'm lucking out with some successful results. So I'm trying to capitalize on that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was just, and excuse me for doing this, but I am going to read this because there's so many, and I'm only going to go back to 2019. But Mesquite Canyon first, Whiskey Basin trail runs first, Zane Grey first, Desert Solstice for the first 50K first, Javelina in 2020 first, and by the way, third overall there. Second in Tusha's mountain runs in 2021, and then J&J Race Trail Running Reunion first, and then another first at Brazos Bend in 2022. Captain Carey's Colorado Bend first, Sky Island 50K first, and then just this month, second at Bandera 100K in 10 hours, mind you. So it doesn't feel like there's any kind of slowing down or end in sight here.
Well, thank you. I mean, I like to believe that, but yeah, I feel strong. So I just feel probably really thankful that I'm still able to compete.
You do have the Canassus genes, clearly. It must
I
be
clear
something.
I feel lucky that it must be the Greek genes.
Well, cool. I want to double click a little on the 2020 race in Javelina. Obviously, it's become a bit of a favorite for you, the style of it, the nature of it. But I know you've done obviously your share of mountain running. It's not so much a lot of elevation, right, with Javelina.
Yeah, not really. So it is really more of a kind of flatter course. Very similar to Rocky,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. So third overall, just walk us through kind of. I know you don't wear a watch, right, when you're running. That's correct.
Yeah,
And
correct.
you're generally not a data have all the records of everything, but you must have some recollection of the build that led into such a strong performance there in Javelina. What do you put it down to? Like, what do you think came together for you?
Yeah, that was a good year. So I was really fortunate during the pandemic to just have a really good cycle of training. And so my husband, Zach, really helped me a lot. And we did a lot of speed work early on. And probably about 6 weeks out, we decided that maybe I should do Javelina and give it a go when it looked like it was going to get off the ground. So we went out to the course and did a long run. And then just jumping in the race, I felt really strong. And so I think it was all really a successful buildup that was led to a strong performance there. And ironically, this past year in 2022, my Javelina time was about a minute different from my time in 2020, just to kind of give an indication of not even wearing a watch.
You're right.
I think the course was a bit longer during 2022 just because they had taken some of the loop out due to the pandemic. So, there was a minor adjustment, but how ironic that like not wearing a watch, you get that close with a time result. Yeah.
What you said there, you did some speed work, and then you also you said you did a long run. So for you and Zach, 100-mile, professional athletes, what does speed work mean for you guys?
Well, so at that point, it was interesting because of the pandemic. We decided to just have some fun and do some fast 5K and half marathon runs. So conveniently, I'm very fortunate that my husband can basically pace me for that kind of stuff, right? And run alongside me. And it's not too much of an effort for him. So I broke my, I think, 5K PR that I could remember. And I ran a pretty fast half marathon. So we were doing actual speed type stuff. Usually when I think about a buildup of speed for 100, we do a lot of marathon training as a buildup, and that works pretty well. I'm fortunate I train with Team Rogue in Austin. And so I do a lot of workouts with their marathon training group on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. And that's usually kind of the speed I need to be successful at 100 miles. Right. So we played around with it and do different things, but I like running with the Team Rogue group simply because I have a couple of friends that I've known for years. So it's just nice to run miles with them when they're kind of getting ready for their marathon stuff.
Well, it's funny you say that Zach can run with you. He was telling me the other weekend when he was out here that Courtney's husband said that what's it like to be able to run with your wife? So apparently he can't quite match it with Courtney. So
well, she's the GOAT. I mean, she is amazing, that's for sure.
So talking about then, if you will, annualized, if you look at over a year, and I guess the bulk of your training, your racing, well, it's actually split across the year, I guess, but probably more so in the middle of the year. What does the year look like for you? How do you break it up between you laying down your base miles and then your speed, etc.?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And last year was a little unique because I didn't run Western States. I think when I've historically run Western States, and that kind of dictates then the buildup for my year oftentimes. And so what I usually do is I spend a lot of the winter months doing kind of more marathon type stuff. So really trying to get the speed in, and then I more specialize for the course in the spring. So having more climbing to do the specificity for Western states. So that is usually kind of what I feel like is the successful way to train for me that I found for Western states. I know other people have different approaches, but I guess also there's the a reality that I don't live in the mountains. So kind of have to be creative and try and get out to do some training runs out there, usually in the spring.
Okay. I know, and I won't go through it. You and Zach had a great podcast up like a week or so back on like coming out of South Africa, and then you kind of had this almost forced rest, right?
Yeah.
With your ankle. It obviously fully recovered.
Yeah.
If you kind of reflect on that, do you kind of take anything from that, like forced rest and the nature of that build as you think about upcoming racing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if I do plan to do Rocky Raccoon, I'll take some time off of after that race just to give myself a break, because I do think with age, recovery is even more critical, right? I think all studies would show that. I also think as I've gotten older, I don't mind the rest quite as much. Like I'm happy to take more time off and do more cross training and things. I just find that I enjoy it more. It just makes the time running more enjoyable, I think, for me. So I'm less afraid of taking a break from running than I think when I was even 10 years ago or 20 years ago. I think I was more kind of like after a race, I'd want to get right back to it. And now I'm kind of like, I need at least a week off where I'm not doing any running, right? And then, you know, depending on how I feel, I would potentially even take more time. But I'm feeling really strong right now. I recovered really well from Bandera very quickly. So, you know, part of me also thinks like strike while the iron's hot, because I just think when you're running well, it's kind of good to capitalize on that.
For sure. So you ran 10:04 in Bandera for 100K. Is that your fastest 100K, by the way?
I think it is. I was talking to a friend who was looking at my times, and she said that it was a bit faster than another time I ran in 2017. But I think the distinction is this year was much warmer than when I ran in 2017. So I actually think it was quite a bit better of a performance.
Do you prefer the flats versus the mountain racing? I know you've been over to Chamonix, you've done UTMB.
Yeah.
I think you were, if my memory serves me correct, I thought one year you went 13. To Trans-Gran Canaria also. Is that right?
Oh, I did Madeira.
Okay.
Madeira. I would love to go to Trans-Gran Canaria. You know, I'm probably better at the flat stuff. If I lived in the mountains, you know, I would love to think I would get better at that stuff. But I love doing races in the mountains. I mean, UTMB was kind of like running in the Sound of Music, right? You felt like you were in the movies. It was amazing. So I loved the experience, but it's hard coming from a place. I think at the time in 2015, I lived in Dallas, Texas. So, you know, you can only do so much, in my opinion, to get ready for those races. But that being said, that's where I try and at least once a year run a race. That's kind of a stretch. I mean, that's why I was in South Africa. I wanted to do UTCT just because you only live once, and I'm not afraid to do things that I'm not as strong at. So, yeah, I love the mountain stuff. It just probably doesn't love me quite as much.
Well, we first met at your home, which is when Zach was going after his world record, which was, I tell Zach it's more stressful than my when I got married.
Oh my gosh, that was so stressful.
Very stressful day, but it was a successful day. But it was great to meet you then. And I think probably from that point, you started maybe experimenting with some of the SFuels products. We can talk a little bit about your nutrition, maybe starting from be interesting just to get your experience and the way you work kind of the night before and race morning, and then we can talk about during the race. But, you know, has there been any like quite material change over I think you said you've been running ultras for 10 years. Like if you had to think about some of the big changes?
No, not so much. You know, it's funny, but even before Zach, probably in college, I found that I kind of preferred a low carb approach or like strategically placed carbs. So I've kind of eaten this way for a long, long time. I mean, I just found that I didn't want to eat a pasta dinner before I ran a cross country race. I preferred to eat salmon or chicken, right? So I think things like that are already clicked for me a really long time ago. And I do strategically place carbs, you know, in aspects, but I am much less prescriptive, right? Like I have less data backing how I eat. I just found that this is what's worked for me, right? In terms of, the years, but in terms of kind of the day of, I used Race Plus and Prime for purposes of javelina as well as Bandera. And that's worked really well for me. And that's what I've been using. And I should say javelina in 2020 and javelina in 2022. But when I've been racing, that's primarily what I've used. And that's just been really great for me. I love the products. And so, you know, I have to say that I'm fortunate that I have a pretty strong stomach too. So I can get away with eating food at aid stations. So you know, if I don't have the option, I can eat real foods as well. So I'm kind of lucky in that sense.
Yeah. I mean, most obviously ultra runs, particularly 100 miles, right? It's always a mix of solids and of fluids and things. You mentioned the Primes product, which is our caffeine product, and then the Race Plus product, but the actual volume that you used in Brazos, I thought Zach was telling me it was like, when he did the math on it was like 200 grams of carbohydrate. You may not even know the data yourself.
Yeah, that's what he was telling me. He said that I really did not take as much in as I should have. And so he really wanted me to increase for purposes of the next races. That's something we talked about. And that's why sometimes it's, you know, it's good to do what feels best, but at a certain point, it's also good to look at the science. And that's where like you and Zach helped me a lot because you know, I try and be a little less data minded just because I'm so focused on metrics and things at work, right? So to keep running fun, I kind of lean to the other end of the spectrum. But that being said, I think after having that discussion, it really dawned on me that I probably needed to take in more for fuel for purposes of Western and other races.
I mean, it was interesting because I guess, 10 hours, 200 grams, so that's 20 grams an hour. I mean, we've got athletes coming to SFuels off a back of 120 grams an hour in triathlon. And they're wondering of all these gut issues they're having and what have you. But I mean, at one end of the rainbow, if you will, we have athletes like yourself and Zach who are like in the 20, 30, 40 grams per hour range. Hayden Wild, you know, podiumed at the Olympics on Olympic distance triathlon. You know, he's in a higher amount, but even still, it's much lower than some of these, you know, almost forced carbohydrate levels that we see in the industry today. But 20 is very low. But it just shows you what's possible if your metabolism is strong. What about night before and race morning? What's typical for you, Nicole?
Yeah, so the night before I usually have, I love salmon, so I'll preface with that. I usually have like vegetables, and then I really like sourdough bread. So that's typically like a meal for me, maybe potato. That's the kind of thing I have before. And then the morning of, I've been doing this forever, and I usually have some kind of bread with peanut butter.
Okay.
And that's what works well for me.
Works for you.
And I have noticed that I probably eat a little less before my effort than I used to. I used to have like a more substantial breakfast, and now I just start taking calories in earlier. I don't know. I've just found that that just works better for
Works.
me. Yeah.
Are you a
But
coffee, tea drinker in the morning, like for running or not?
no, I'm one of those people that gets up and 5 minutes later is really out the door. So I don't take in anything before, and I know, maybe that's not the best. But then that's kind of how I roll. So I know, it's probably good to have a little more caffeine in, especially on race day, but I haven't historically done that.
That's what the next race is for, right? To test all this stuff out.
Yeah,
Always
I
another
know.
race.
I would be the person to like test it out the race day. I'm not a coffee drinker though. I do love tea, but I don't know. Zach swears by it, so I should probably look into it.
Listen to your coach.
Yeah.
So Western States this year, you've got your golden ticket. Congratulations. It's awesome.
Thank
We're
you.
thrilled to see that. Like it's a fascinating course in many respects, like just even from a temperature perspective, the swing in temperature at Western States through the day, and then obviously elevation shifts and things like that. What do you love, what do you don't like about Western States that kind of brings you back there?
No, I think the competition
Yeah,
always brings me back, but probably what is most notable to me is like I still always think I can do better, right? And
right.
just like that need to try and be my best is, I think, what brings me back.
Yeah,
In terms of what I don't like, I think it's a challenging one because it's so iconic, right? So you always feel the pressure because I think
right.
there's that self-imposed, you want to have your best day at a big race like that. So that's challenging,
Yeah.
right? Just managing expectations, mostly on myself, right? So I think that's something that has gotten a lot easier the older I get, because I just feel like I've
Right.
started to look back and say, I've had great days there,
Mhm.
right? So what do I have to
Yeah.
lose? Like, I just want to do the best I can.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
How do you handle the heat? You're coming through the canyons there. What's typical approach do you take for handling the heat?
So I usually really am good about icing. So I usually have like an ice bandana, put ice everywhere, and then just really try and stay cool strategically, like spraying myself with water and such. Yeah, it's such an important element of the game, is really making sure your core temperature is kept down. So that is definitely something to be mindful of. And then obviously I have the advantage. I mean, I live in Austin, Texas now. I
Yeah.
was historically living in Dallas or Phoenix. So it's nice coming from a warm weather place because you don't have the altitude, but you do have the heat training.
Yeah, that's good. So, you obviously have studied well who typically is turning up at Western States. I've got to ask you, like, what do you think it takes time-wise at the moment in the women's field to win?
Well, ironically enough, I was just looking, I think in the women's field this year, I think Courtney will decimate the course record. I mean, I just think she's exceptional and it's hers to take unless, she unfortunately has like a bad event.
Right.
And I think that's just going to push the competition. But I think we're just seeing more women enter the 17-hour, 18-hour. And so I think I'm definitely shooting for the 18s. This year, I think it will be a bit slower though, simply because I think there will be snow in the high country and that slows down the race, right? Because you have to run through the snow in the high country and that's pretty challenging.
Yeah.
So that I've been through that that type of course. I've kind of run the gamut. So
yeah, you have. I gotta have a plug for your sponsor. You'll be running in Mont Blanc, so you'll be running in something else from Ultra.
yeah, I think the Mont Blancs, they're great.
They're
So
your preference. Cool.
yes.
That's good. And how's the Rogue Running group? It's quite a training group now. I see just some of the photos out there. There's quite a few that are coming along every weekend.
Yeah, it's a huge group, so it's really nice. And we're trying to build out the trail group. So if anybody ever wants to come run, just reach out to me and we'll get you looped in. But yeah, I've loved being part of the group since I moved to Austin.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, cool. It's been so good to catch up, and we certainly will be in touch as we get closer to Western States. And all the best for your training. I hope sounds like your ankle's fully recovered anyway.
Yeah.
Based on this result this month. But there's more to come. What is there anything else further in the year after Western States, or that's the A race of the year?
That's my A race. I'd love to jump in something else, but I'm trying to figure out what I'll do. But if I get my wish, I'll probably try and do something international, just because I just love to go to different places and check out the trails and the culture. So
you'll have to come back to Hong Kong again and do the Hong Kong 100. Huh?
I love that. I love that. I'd also love to toe the line at UTCT, because I did not get to do it. And then I see UTMB Thailand looks amazing.
Oh, yeah.
So I'd love to give that a go.
Sure.
My list goes on, Leighton.
Yeah,
that's the problem.
Right. That's what's good about it.
Yeah.
Well, great to catch up. Thanks for joining, folks. And we'll make sure that we put some of the notes up on YouTube as we get this posted. Thanks for joining again. We'll catch up soon, Nicole.
Thank you. Take care.
I am just excited to be back out and competing at the highest level. So Western States is always the opportunity to go out and challenge yourself against the best of competition.